This guy, Bryan Johnson, is on a mission to not die. And I recently watched the Netflix documentary Don't Die, which is all about his journey and all about how he's managed to reverse the aging process. And his quest for the fountain of eternal youth ultimately lies in a $2 million a year protocol. That includes a rigid schedule of waking up at 4:30 a.m. each day and going straight into his bathroom for some light therapy. He pops over 90 supplements and therefore must have the most expensive pee in the world. His eating is strictly controlled and he eats all of his meals before 11 a.m. every single day. Lots of his days are spent in testing, in treatments, in therapies, in training. It's a really strict and rigid schedule and one that he doesn't step out of. And a lot of the tests and treatments that he's having are ultimately him being a guinea pig because they haven't been fully proven by way of sort of clinical testing and science. And he's even, in the therapies that he does, he goes down there. And fair play to him, he's actually managed to reduce his aging rate down to 0.64 for every year. And from this, he's also created his blueprint business as well as the Don't Die movement, selling protocols, selling products, selling conferences, and all sorts of other things. Now, I want to start by saying, I know that Bryan's received so much hate, and for me, underneath it all, when I watched the documentary, I could see he's a goofy guy, he's a dad, he's clearly a family guy, and in the good as well. Ultimately, a lot of his messages at its heart telling us everything that is wrong with our food systems, with our society, with our culture. When it comes to, I suppose, some fundamental basics, a lot of us need better sleep, better nutrition, more hydration, more movement, etc. So there's definitely a good side to this mission, because ultimately, if he can encourage us to live healthier and, live healthier by way of a quest for us to be able to live healthier for longer, that's got to be a positive thing for us, right? But also, Bryan's going through a huge sacrifice in order to live this lifestyle, in order to put himself, push himself to the edge of sort of clinical research to test things that ultimately we don't know if they're going to cause, short-term, medium-term, or sort of further up the path, any kind of damage to him and ultimately his quest to live forever. In the documentary, there was some really lovely moments with his son, and I know that he mentioned about the fact that he wants to live multiple lifetimes with his son, that 100 years is not going to be enough. And what I also sort of really connect into is, the fear of loss and that fear of all of our impermanence, that at some point in life we have to say goodbye to every single person who we love. And I wonder sort of how much that also plays into this quest for ultimately living forever. And I'm sure any of us can relate, whether you're a parent or whether you're thinking about other beloved family members, that loss and that acknowledgement that at some point we all have to say goodbye is profoundly painful. And it's a really, really difficult one for us to face into if we're not used to having these conversations. Which brings me to the question, is Bryan ultimately scared of death? I'm scared of loss, scared of losing those who he loved. Now, this is something that Bryan has refuted in this video.
You fear death?
No, I don't fear death. I'm not sure if I really understand the emotion fear. I hear people talk about it and I understand it in concept, but I don't necessarily experience it.
Is there another word or emotion that you relate that replaces fear?
I don't want to be dead.
Worry?
No. I just don't want to be dead. I'm happy that I exist, and I don't know yet what it's like to be, dead. But as far as we know, we haven't heard back from anyone yet on what it's like. So I'm waiting for evidence.
I wonder actually, if he had a bank of the very best psychologists working within his blueprint team, what would they unearth? And I don't know, maybe he does work with therapists, but that's certainly not something that came across in the documentary at all that was spoken to. I think there's a difference between, say, anti-aging and, wanting to, I suppose, promote longevity and not specifically wanting to die. When I was at university studying biology, actually, I studied the biology of aging, and I always found it really fascinating because actually the longevity side of things is really, really crucial, particularly when we've got aging populations. And I speak as someone who's had 3 grandparents who have had to navigate with dementia, which is just absolutely awful if you go through it. So if we're giving ourselves the best shot at living longer and living better, then I'm ultimately all for it. But If we're trying to avoid death altogether, and death that is ultimately a fundamental part of our life, including happening in our body at all points as cells die, then I wonder, how are we taking ourselves away from the wholeness that is ultimately our human existence? Our human life cycle, it's a cycle, and it includes obviously birth, but the end of that cycle includes death. So next up, let's look at the name, Don't Die. And this is, I suppose, the aspect where I've got, I guess, the most issue with it. And as a marketer, I can fully understand. I get it when I've seen Bryan talking about the fact that, you need a name that's going to spur people into action. Instead of don't die, let's live. Let's live isn't going to make anyone do anything differently. And if you look on the Don't Die website, it's got really provocative phrases that I'm just not sure are really good for humanity. I pledge to rage against the dying of the light, because we are at war with death and its causes, building towards an infinite horizon. So if we live by this ethos where we are at war with death, where we're fighting against it, my concern is that ultimately this plays into a lot that is really wrong in our society right now. There are many experts who've said that actually our medical system got it wrong in wanting to fight to the very last breath, that fight. Instead of actually saying, let's look holistically, let's see where it's important to fight, and let's see where it's important to bring in palliative care and all sorts of, therapies and treatments to ensure that someone can live to the very best of their quality of life. And I wonder when it comes to whether it's Bryan, but also more broadly, people within the movement, are there people in the Don't Die movement who are able to hold these sorts of conversations? And this for me is the crucial thing. I think that don't die is really, I suppose, too binary, and it doesn't allow for conversations around death. And I just wonder, by way of the psychological impact. My final thought on Don't Die is just that thought around, I wonder why billionaires can't be using their, I suppose, well, in this case, their experiments on themselves to truly be to the benefit of humanity. And I don't want to knock Bryan as well for everything that he is doing by way of all of his content. But actually what's really interesting is the fact that actually while he is a human guinea pig for a lot of these therapies, kind of the way that he's going about it ultimately means that there's sort of minimal benefits by way of this becoming sort of, I suppose, like fundamental research that could help humankind. And the reality is, there's a huge issue in aging populations. That is something that's happening worldwide. We are living longer, but we're not living better. I wonder, wouldn't it be wonderful if these billionaires actually sort of put their money where their mouth is without the commercial returns and said, you know what? I'm going to donate in order for scientists to be able to do the research, via these universities, via these research institutions, to be able to really, truly help overhaul, whether it's health systems, social systems, etc., for the good of all humankind. For me, one of the things that really strikes me is that actually, if these billionaires want to be immortal and want to go down in the history books of humanity, there is a massive opportunity for them to do so. Definitely say Don't Die. It was a really good watch. It was one that had my toes curling at certain points. I think it was the plasma thing that really, really got me. Not for the therapy, because actually to me, I think when it's your father, absolutely, I think the majority of us would say, I will do anything, in the same way that we might donate, I don't know, a kidney or donate some sort of bone marrow transplants or other stuff if it's for a family in need. But where I don't vibe with Don't Die is really kind of that ethos of being at war with death. I don't think that death is something to be at war with. I think when it comes to disease and other things, I think those are really noble places to focus our attention on. And for me, that is really at the heart of, yes, like that biology of aging, that longevity science is really important for us to be looking at by way of quality of life. But building towards a supposedly infinite horizon, whilst also living on a finite planet with finite everything on it, it ultimately feels to me like a quest that takes us away from the wholeness of our human existence. So that's all of my thoughts on the Don't Die documentary. I would love to hear what you think. Put it in the comments and let's chat. And while you're there as well, if you don't mind, hit the like button and maybe even hit the subscribe button. I'm sending you lots and lots of love.